Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And it's the first show of the new year. Happy New Year to you, Dr. Lopkin, and everyone listening to us. How many years have we been doing this now, Dr. Lopkin?
About 14 or so.
Wow, amazing. You'd never know.
Uh,
Here's what we have on the agenda. I think for me, and I think for many of our listeners, I know it's of interest to you as well, is Gay is gone at Harvard. And why do I mention that? Because I think it has many ramifications. And before I give my little 2 cents, what do you think of the ramifications of this action?
Actually, I don't think there are going to be many ramifications because unfortunately, she's not really gone. She's still a Harvard faculty member with
Nine
a
hundred thousand.
million dollar salary, but she is an example of how DEI has failed. And I heard somebody this morning, and I love this. DEI actually stands for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. And
I love that.
that is
Too bad we didn't
really,
think of it.
I know, but that is really what DEI has been about. It's ticking the boxes, doesn't matter, if somebody's qualified for the job. Meanwhile, I've actually spoken with a number of Harvard alumni and Harvard faculty, and they have all said they are amazed. They do not understand how they offered her the job
Well,
without checking into all of this plagiarism.
I know why. I know
Yeah,
why, Dr.
well,
Lopkin.
we know
Because
why,
no,
but
DEI trumps everything.
yep,
So in their enthusiasm and falling over backwards to have this applicant, checking all the boxes, the first black woman to head an Ivy League institution, all scrutiny goes out the window, including plagiarism. And also, I'm sorry to say, not exactly what I used to consider Harvard material. That's just my thinking. There you go.
well, that's actually something we've discussed in the past. I mean, everybody's image of Harvard is not the truth. Because take a look at their faculty. You have Gay, who's, again, still on faculty, anti Semitic, plagiarist. This has all been proven. This is not, speculation. You have Lori Lightfoot, who an abject
A genius.
failure as the mayor
A
of
genius,
Chicago.
though. Up
You
there
have
with you go Einstein, Lightfoot.
Yeah,
There you
you
go.
have Brian Stelter from CNN. None
Another
of these
genius.
people are qualified to be Harvard professors, but they are. And now you are seeing a massive pullback in student applications.
Yes, in
And
the double digits.
there was a great piece, a current Harvard student came out and was wrote this article explaining to their parents why a Harvard education is not worth what they're paying.
Oh, it's not. We've already
Yeah,
talked about this. We don't have to, beat this dead horse. I'm talking about, my little comment here. It's not education. It's indoctrination, and it's all about inclusion. It's not looking at the facts. Even the look at the flood, the outflow of anti-Semitism. That's created in a vacuum of intellectual discussion. That's indoctrination. Like
yes, it
if
is.
you're
And
looking at the Middle East, I don't know, a Harvard or a real education, higher education, is going to look at both sides. There are two sides to the story, and somewhere the truth is in the middle. But no, because everything is all about DEI and about victimization. Palestinians are victims. Jews slash Israelis are the oppressors. Fits the narrative, doesn't it? Surprise,
that's
surprise.
their narrative, and that narrative is damaging the student body. And since this is not going to result in a change to the faculty, which, let's face it, that's where the anti-Semitism starts because
Without a doubt.
they're the ones teaching the students. You have a number of Wall Street firms, a number of law firms who have all come out and said it's good that gay is stepping down, but we're still not going to hire Harvard graduates because the
Yeah, I think
problem
that
still exists.
and I think there that is the among others the ramification. I think it exposed the emperor had no clothes, the whatever behind the curtain uh, shows really exposed in a national way, shed light on what's really going on in these so-called prestigious venues of education. I do think there's another ramification, and I think it will be eventually how they like this a realignment at these schools, um, partially based on embarrassment, declining enrollment numbers, loss of prestige, but also money talks, bullshit walks. In 1 week, they lost $1 billion, which let's cut the shit. Harvard and some of these other Ivy League schools are nothing more than a hedge fund dressed up as a school of higher learning. There you go.
Yes,
Um,
most of these higher education institutions need to lose their nonprofit status.
hello.
They are not benefiting the American people. They are benefiting people like Gay, who is making $1 million a year to spout anti-Semitism.
And then, by the way, supported by Barack Hussein Obama.
Yes.
Surprise, surprise. I know that comes as a shock. I think the other ramification, and I think there's others included, but I think the biggest thing is now you see corporations shedding, even liberal corporations like Google shedding the DEI bullshit
Yeah,
because
in
it's led to nowhere. And you even look at companies like Disney, Iger saying, okay, let's cut the shit and make entertainment.
Yeah, in the corporate world, DEI is
Dead.
fading fast. The DEI executives have been let go, policies are being changed, and it all has to do with the failure at the bottom line. Disney, you just mentioned, for the first time in, I believe, over a decade, in 2023, lost the top spot at the box office globally. That is going to affect them. They don't care about people protesting. They don't care about people yelling online. What they care about is money. And when people stop spending money on their products, that's when they pay attention.
Absolutely, and the new Avenger movie just completely sucked. That's something you can always rely on if you're Disney. It's just almost a no-brainer. But I use the term no-brainer. Maybe they should have, put their minds in gear before they thought about the woke agenda in the movie because it bombed. No one wants to hear this shit. It was ridiculous, ridiculous storyline, and it's a very simple equation, Dr. Lotkin. They're money-making machines. These Marvel movies, okay, superhero movies. You don't have to be a genius to figure out the plot line, but you do have to be a moron to screw it up. What do you think of that?
Well, they did a lot to screw it up, even more than just the woke agenda, though that did piss a lot of people off. Disney bought Marvel and Disney, not Disney, Marvel and Lucasfilm because they did not have properties that were attracting young males. All of their stuff was Disney princesses and it was all focused on girls. So they needed properties to attract a male audience. And once they bought Marvel and Lucasfilm, what did they do? They made it woke. They turned it into, well, now it's inclusive, so it's more female
Yeah.
friendly. It's like, no, you already had female friendly money coming in. You needed male friendly money coming in. And when they started making everything interconnected so that you couldn't just go to a movie and watch a movie, you had to watch 3 series on Disney Plus and 4 movies previously to understand what was going on. The audience just went, enough is enough.
Yes, I think those are all good points, and I think my takeaway, at least, is there are two major ramifications to this. Is that a reexamination of the real value, the real deliverable, and the nonprofit status of Ivy League institutions, as well as the whole DEI movement being more than scrutinized and shredded. I think it's proven to be an abject disaster. Corporations are running away from it. The only one that's running towards it is Al Sharpton. Surprise, surprise, the shakedown king, a genius himself.
Well,
So
you're also seeing a lot of blowback in the general public. Over the last, I believe yesterday, U-Haul came out with their annual ranking of states, saying where people are moving and where people are moving to. And lo and behold, people are fleeing from liberal run states. The biggest fleeing, California, New York, Connecticut was number 45 on the list. New Jersey was in the bottom 5. Uh, folks, Illinois was in the bottom 5. People are leaving the woke cities, the woke states, because they're saying enough is enough. I want leaders who are going to look out for my best interest, not some woke agenda, because people are realizing that the woke agenda does not include them. And it doesn't matter who they are. They can be white, they can be black, they can be Hispanic, whoever they are, they're starting to see this woke agenda is for everybody but them.
for elitist, white,
Yeah.
privileged idiots. That's who it's
Yes.
for. And even look at Charlemagne the God basically
Yep.
saying, yeah, I can't really support Biden. His policies aren't working for me in the black community. And you see a shredding and shedding of especially black males. I think Biden's lost over 20 points in that group. And I think it's continuing to heading downward in a accelerating manner. What do you think of that, Dr.
Well,
Lotkin?
the statement from Charlemagne the God is huge because he has a massive following, both his radio show, his podcast, as well as his online activities on social media. And he didn't just say that he can't support Joe Biden. He said he regretted supporting him in 2020 because Biden did not live up to anything he was saying. He said he was embarrassed by Kamala Harris just vanishing into the administration. Turned out to be completely useless, and he refuses to endorse the ticket in 2024. That is big. When you have lost 20% of the African American community between 2020 and 2024, and a major media star that influences that community says, yeah, I will not back you. I'm not going to help you. You did not help our community. Other African Americans, especially African American males, are going to listen.
100%, and it's also the big disconnect between what's on the minds of black people. What's on the minds of black people and people of color are the same things that are on the mind of all of us. Paying the bills, not being subject to crime. It's not about Tinkerbell is now transgender. I can assure you.
Yeah, what's on their minds is the same thing that has always been on their minds, and it's the same thing that's been on every middle class person's mind and every poor person's mind. And actually, this is what is wrong with the modern Democratic Party. And I came across this over the New Year's break that we took. I happened to see a clip of a very old Johnny Carson show prior to it taking the format that everybody is familiar with now. He was hosting a roundtable discussion, and it was right after the death of Robert Kennedy. And they were talking about what set Robert and JFK apart. And what this roundtable decided was their policies were based on the fact that they understood that distributing opportunity is more effective and more welcome by people than distributing wealth is.
Well, yeah, but an
That,
attitude like that will get you thrown out of the modern day Democratic
yes, and
Party. You
that's the
shouldn't say that too
problem with
loud if you're a Democrat.
that's the problem with the modern Democratic Party. They have lost this. And I mean, let's face it, this is the Kennedys. The Kennedys practically built the
Yes.
Democratic Party in the 60s. These folks knew what the American people wanted, what the American people needed. It wasn't called Camelot for nothing. We need to get back, both parties, to the idea of distributing opportunity. We can't boost people up against their will. We can't boost people up giving them everything and not having them have any skin in the game. People need to be involved. They need to chase those opportunities and achieve them, not just be given money, not just be given something. And that's what they don't understand now. That's why
Well, they
these DEI programs have completely failed.
Well, I'll tell you one thing they do understand, especially the Democratic elite, like our good senator from Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal, is how to crush the S&P 500 by almost double digits. Senator Blumenthal, a big lib, probably totally, at least his talking points would be a pro-socialist agenda. Just beat the S&P by almost 50 points. Surprise! How did that happen?
Yeah,
Do as I say, not as I do.
it's amazing how the socialist agenda goes out the window when it comes to their own personal finances.
Oh yes, yes, yeah, and Pelosi included. Very interesting, but there'll be no real ramifications for that. But I think a ramification that will happen is that we've now crossed the $34 trillion mark for our deficit. I will date myself, Dr. Lopin, because I can do that. I'm confident enough to do that. Is when I was in high school. It was the big race was heating up between Reagan and Carter. And do you know what the hotbed issue was? The deficit. Take a guess. Do you know what the deficit was at that point?
Comparatively nothing, but
One 500 billion. That I
yes.
know. So with inflation, let's just say it was 2 trillion. That's like a rounding error.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, half a trillion, and that was a huge issue. I think 34 trillion is unsustainable.
It is unsustainable. And part of the problem is that the American people don't understand the terminology. And I'm going to boil it down for our listeners because I've actually spoken to a lot of people saying, they don't understand what the difference is between the national debt and the national deficit. Aren't they the same thing? They're not. The national debt is all of the money that the United States owes. So, on an individual basis, the debt is how much money you owe. It's your mortgage, your credit cards, every piece of debt you have. Put that all together, that's your debt. That's what the national debt is. The deficit is how much money we are spending that is more than the amount of money we are receiving.
Hmm.
So this is the money that we don't have, but we are spending anyway.
In places like Ukraine, by the way, yeah,
In
good idea.
places,
And by the way, the national debt is also underreported because many times it doesn't factor in unfunded mandates.
yes, there are a lot of accounting tricks that are used
Yes,
in calculating the debt. Um, it's less severe with the national debt than it is state debts. States, when any state tells you they have a balanced budget, don't believe them. The first question you have to ask is the state pension fully funded? Most
there you
states
go.
will tell you no. Well, if your pension is not fully funded, then you don't have a balanced budget, you have debt. So, yeah,
Another trickery, yes, and that obviously has to be paid. Talking about things being unsustainable, I found this very interesting. Do you know what the number one issue? Well, what was always the number one issue in politics. And what's his name? The Raging Cajun said that back in
James
1990.
Carville, it's the economy, stupid.
Well, things have
That
changed in 2024. What do you think the number one issue is?
the,
Crossing ideology, by the way, and
yes,
party affiliation.
yes, the new issue of concern beating out the economy is open borders. And that is because we have seen more people cross the border illegally in December than we have ever before.
And I always ask ramifications. Besides Mayorkas being formally recommended to be impeached, what are the ramifications? Obviously, in my little pea brain, I would say that if both parties find this the number one, so crossing party ideology and affiliation, number one issue, it cannot help Biden. And I think it also goes into the incompetence equation.
Well, it's certainly not going to help Biden. But one of the big ramifications of this is something I mentioned a little bit earlier, the U-Haul survey, because the places people are leaving from are sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. They don't want their tax money going to pay for illegal migrants rather than
So
the citizens benefits for
yeah,
citizens,
but you
benefits for veterans.
let but let's cut the shit. They wanted this. Again, do as I say, not as I do. It all was groovy and cool until the shit hit the fan. Now it's like whoa, whoa, whoa. Just like Martha's Vineyard. So it was all a bunch of shit until they actually had to face it.
Exactly. It's like most liberal policies. In theory, it sounded great. In practice, it has been a complete failure. Sanctuary cities are dying. They do not have the income to handle the influx of migrants. The White House is not doing anything about this. In fact, they're trying to make the problem worse. The Biden administration yesterday went to the Supreme Court to overturn a lower court decision saying that the federal government did not have the right to cut the razor wire barriers that Texas has been putting up. So they are trying to make the problem worse. And, Karine Jean Pierre keeps saying, well, Congress has to pass laws. No,
No.
there are no laws that have to be passed. The laws are already on the books, and the Biden administration has refused to enforce them. That is the key. It's not about fixing the system, it's not about passing new laws. It is about enforcing the existing laws. If we enforced the existing laws, this would not be a problem.
100% agreed. I also agree or strongly believe that Mayorkas needs to be impeached and in a real country basically should be tried for treason. There you go. And also, when you think about it, you talk about the January 6th, the so-called insurrection. Well, treason, that basically would preclude you from running from office. And how does that not relate to Biden?
There have been people who have been floating that idea, and it is actually the main reason why many Democrats have come out against these secretaries of state and liberal courts taking Trump off the ballot, because it's a slippery slope. It opens the door for charges against Biden to say, yes, he refused to enforce existing laws. That is treason because that is his job. And so he is ineligible to run. Now, personally, I think both parties need to stop this impeachment bullshit, need to stop these arguing in the courts, because these are just political tricks and the public is getting tired of them. In fact, the more these courts try to take Trump off the ballot, the higher his approval rating goes, because
Well, on that point, though, on that point, there's several polls that have come out that the attitudes of people, especially middle of the road people, is actually changing in relation to the January 6th so-called insurrection as it relates to Trump. That it was a big negative, still is a negative, but that is changing, and I think some of that is all the bullshit that's accompanying the January 6th circus. Do you agree or not? And
Yes.
if and then and also they're talking about ramifications. If that's the only thing the Democrats are hanging their hat on, that ain't good.
No, it's not good at all. And that is a big problem. The January 6th committee was a kangaroo court, and people are
Come on, it was a joke.
seeing that. There was no real investigation. There was no real testimony with people actually being able to cross examine witnesses. That is how these congressional hearings are supposed to work. What we have been seeing over the past, I'd say, 16 years or so is political theater. It is nonsense. And in fact, you and I said this when we were on terrestrial radio, and this was what got us kicked off of terrestrial radio when we told a Wesleyan professor that what the Democrats were doing was not illegal impeachment, but was political theater and had no basis in law. That has been
Well, that'll get
going
you
on.
thrown out, certainly.
That when you
We
are,
have that in our pedigree. There you go.
yes, when you are on a liberal radio station from a liberal, sponsored by a liberal college, they don't want to hear that. But that is what has been going on. And unfortunately, now people are trained to accept that. And this is why, you keep hearing people like, oh, well, the Biden impeachment's gone nowhere. The Biden impeachment's gone nowhere. No, the Biden impeachment is actually following the legal process, which the Trump impeachments didn't. So, yes, these are supposed to be investigations, not shows. You are not supposed to hire television producers to produce your hearings like they did with January 6th.
100%. All these are going to be thrown out. Maine just is trying to keep Trump off the ballot. I think there's no way. And again, this whole thing, it's opening up a can of worms. We're going to become ungovernable. Any two-bid local, DA or whatever can, sue someone that they don't like and tie them up in court. It's really gone crazy, and I think it's not
Well,
good for our democracy on
it
both sides.
it's not good, but people are starting to realize this, and
I hope so.
they're starting to realize that what's going on has no basis in fact or law. Um,
That's why maybe the
the,
polls are changing on the January 6th. Do you think that's why?
it's very possible, but we've already seen that Donald Trump is going to be on the Colorado primary ticket. The Democratic Secretary of State of Colorado has said unless the Supreme Court issues a ruling that upholds the Colorado Supreme Court before the primary, she is leaving Trump on the ballot because she does not believe that the Colorado Supreme Court is going to survive an appeal. And in fact, the dissenting opinion from Democratic judges on the Colorado Supreme Court stated that this hearing had the process and the decision had no basis in law.
Yeah, I think it would almost be a maybe one dissension, but yeah, not. Again, it's just throwing shit against the wall. Speaking of throwing shit, well, in this case, maybe gold bars against the wall. Senator Menendez, new allegations seems to be an accelerating development. And as I said, speaking of accelerating developments, we have the old Epstein situation. Your comments on both. Menendez, I wouldn't spend too much time. The guy's a deadbeat. He's a corrupt piece of shit, and why the Democrats don't throw his ass out is beyond me. Your thoughts on both
Menendez,
issues?
Menendez is Tony Soprano. He's
He's a moron
he's a crook from
with
New
his
Jersey. Yeah,
And his bimbo wife or
he,
whatever. Yeah, hello.
he's a crook from New Jersey. The Democrats should remove him from office. John Fetterman has been arguing to remove Menendez from office. I mean, it's absolutely amazing how they're really quick to criticize across the aisle, but very slow, and this is both parties, very slow to clean up their own house. As far as Epstein is, I can't wait for these names to be released. They are
Oh, I
supposed
know
to.
who's going to be first on the list.
Well,
It's going to be awesome.
we already know Bill Clinton is first on the list. Bill Clinton has been identified in the papers as appearing over 50 times. So yeah, even the
He was
liberal
just
media,
working on his suntan.
right?
Just working on his suntan.
Even the liberal media is going, yeah, we can't defend him on this one. Um, I I'm curious to see if either Obama or Biden show up in these papers. How many other high-ranking Democrats are going to show up? We know that
Bill
Epstein
Gates.
was tied to a number of high-ranking Democrats. We know he was tied to Bill Gates. In fact, we don't know the details, but we know Bill Gates was so involved with Jeffrey Epstein that Gates's wife found it disgusting when she found out about it and left him over it. So, yeah, he's going to be named. We'll see who else is named. But this is another thing. There was no reason for these court documents to be kept sealed for this long, except for high powered people wanted to cover their asses. So, this is another case of it is the political elite that are fighting for themselves and the hell with everybody else.
Yeah, and it's also, Bill Clinton, the wink and the nod, and oh, when you really come down to it, it's a really effed up situation. The guy's a freak, okay? That's insane. In
Well,
no ways.
we also know he's a good buddy of Harvey Weinstein.
There you go. Yeah, the guy's a creep, and he's a serial creep, and I think his stature in history is plummeting as we speak by the minute.
It
Um,
is, and it's funny because I overheard a Republican pundit talking about the image of Bill Clinton and how, on the one hand, looking at what has happened to the Democratic Party, Republicans are looking back going, well, maybe we shouldn't have been so hard on him. His policies were so much better than what the Democrats are trying to push now. And then something like the Epstein papers come out and Republicans go, oh, right, that was why we were hard on him.
Well said. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I was against the impeachment. I'm not sure it should have gone that far. I think he should have been censured. But yeah, it's a creep situation. And the Tale of Two Cities, Dr. Lopkin, that famous memoir
Yep.
book. I had the tales of good Jew, bad Jew. We have Senator Joe Lieberman basically saying it's time to strike Iran, someone that's proud of his Jewishness. And then we have the creep bloodsucker Sanders, who whining about it's immoral to support Israel during their unlawful war. A complete piece of shit. Your comment?
Okay, first of all, there is nothing unlawful about the war in Israel. Israel is defending itself against terrorists. And there was a great quote saying, if Israel puts down their arms, Israel will be destroyed. If Hamas puts down their arms, there will be peace. That is the difference. Bernie Sanders is a self hating Jew. He grew up in a very Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn, the same neighborhood that I grew up in. He hates the fact that he's Jewish. He's embarrassed by it. And, quite frankly, he's of such low moral character. He has a lot more to be embarrassed about than his ethnic heritage. Joe Lieberman, on the other hand, has always been a proud Jew. He refused to work even when he was in the Senate on Saturdays. He kept the Sabbath holy. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's his right, and he was proud to do that. But he has always been about fighting for what is right. That is why he ended up leaving the Democratic Party and becoming an independent when the Democrats were trying to pull out of defending folks in the Middle East, which, again, leads to where we are now. When you take the boot off of Iran's throat and you let them have their money and you let them sell arms and you let them sell oil, this is what happens. They are attacking American troops. They are attacking international commerce through by backing the Houthi rebels. They are the leading funder of terrorism. They fund Hamas. They fund Hezbollah. They fund Islamic Jihad. They fund the Taliban.
I
I
say it still gets back to the Ivy League because you have the geniuses in the Biden and then former cast-offs from Obama. I'm sure they have some theoretical bullshit that they can justify doing what they're doing with Iran. A complete dereliction of duty. They should all be fired. And yeah, hello, genius. You can have a ninth grade education and understand that, yeah, you give them money, you take your boots off their neck. Duh, surprise, surprise, genius. And now they don't give a shit. They think we're a joke. What are we going to do? We even gave orders not to shoot at them, but to shoot at their drones. They know we're impotent and they are laughing just like China's laughing and Putin's laughing. They know this guy's a moron in the White House who's basically brain is rotted and he's got a bunch of Lewinsky-ites, 25-year-old Ivy League grads running the show. Comment?
And that is why Joe Biden currently has the lowest approval rating of any president in American history. He has a lower approval rating than Nixon had during Watergate. And it is
Well
because,
earned, by the way. Well
yes,
earned. The guy
and
hasn't earned a lot in his life, but he earned this one.
yeah,
And deservingly, so I give him full cred.
it is because he is incapable of doing the job. He
He
has
never
been
was.
he has been on vacation for 37% of his term. Everybody knows he is a shadow of his former self, and he was never a Mensa
He was never
candidate to
nothing.
begin with.
Yeah, please. He was a moron to begin with. Yes, he was an incompetent moron. I lived in Philly for many years, and Delaware is right next to Philadelphia. The guy was always a laughing joke. I know you like Johnny Carson, and even back then he used to make jokes. The biggest. He was been always been a moron, always been a grifter, and now he's just a senile slash grifter, moron slash grifter, I should say. Yes.
And again, I think it's a bigger problem than just him, because if he had his faculties, if he had a backbone, then one, he probably wouldn't have hired the staffers he did, but two, when
I
they
hope not.
gave him pushback, he would have stood up to them, which he doesn't. We have in the White House, in the Democratic Party, what was a turning point during the Obama administration, where they went so far to the left. And of course, nobody could criticize Obama because they always played the race card. Oh,
Of
you're
course.
saying something bad about President Obama? It's because you're a racist. No, it's because his policies were terrible. It is because he was an academic. He had no practical experience. And
In anything, by the way, no real world experience. He was
as
a
we've said
shakedown artist.
over and over again, these things might work well in theory, but when you hit the real world, they fall apart. And that is what the president has to deal with, the real world, not some wonderful Harvard theory, something that works in the real world. And that is why the political elite hated Trump, because all of his solutions were based in real world situations. He didn't care about theory. He didn't care about what the elite in higher education was saying. He was a businessman and he was trying to create real world solutions. Was he nice about it? No. What was he a nice guy and somebody you want to have over for dinner? No. But his solutions worked. And as you have said numerous times, when your house is burning down, you don't care if the fireman is an asshole.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Actually, that was quite a good one, I might add. Another thing I might add is that another person that fits that category, he was not an asshole, but he was considered dumb and a moron and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, changed the world. That was Ronald Reagan. Because he didn't do all the Harvard theories of what is it, mutually assured destruction. He goes, no, that's insane. We're not going to do that. Get along, be along, all that crap. And he changed the world. That's the end of the story. But he was, in the press and in academia, he was the bumbling moron. I think not. Your
Right.
bumbling moron is Johnson.
Yeah, Reagan was an actor. He was, performing. He was old and senile. He was actually young and vibrant compared to Biden.
God,
But
please.
what were the results of the Reagan years? The destruction of the Soviet Union. We actually had the end of the Cold War. We had the destruction of the Berlin Wall. We actually had a real hope for peace. And the seeds that Reagan sowed were what Clinton benefited from
Yes,
when there
100%.
when there was an actual brief period of time during the Clinton administration when there were no wars anywhere in the world.
Peace dividend, they called it. Yes.
Yes, it wasn't a long period of time, but there was a period of time. And that all started with the Reagan administration. And that's something else that people do not understand, that no matter who is president, the results of what they do are going to be seen further down the road.
Hope not. Jesus, please.
What happens during their administration is very often how they are mitigating things that were done by their predecessors, or how they're
In this case, I
screwing
think not. Yeah,
or
there you
how
go.
they're
Yeah.
screwing them up. In this case, in what we're seeing in the Biden administration, were seeds sown by the Obama administration. And Trump did his best to mitigate what Obama had done, but then Biden came in and undid everything Trump did.
Not by accident. Speaking of not by accident, there's several polls that have Nikki Haley now taking the second tiered position. Your thoughts ahead of DeSantis, who I think's career has taken a major political setback. If he just held his gunpowder, would have been in much better shape.
Yeah, if you watch DeSantis talk, it is no surprise that Haley has overtaken him. In fact, he was being interviewed this morning on Fox by Bill Hemmer. And he was so antagonistic to Hemmer, he wouldn't let Hemmer ask his questions. It's like, first rule of being interviewed is you don't piss off the interviewer, you let him ask
Yeah,
the
hello.
questions. Uh,
Especially when they're favorable to you. Yes.
right. DeSantis has been unloading their barrels on Nikki Haley. And the fact of the matter is, Nikki Haley is the only Republican in the field. And I'm not counting Trump. I'm just talking about the runners up at this point that has both has local, national, and international experience. DeSantis cannot counter that. And he gets angry at people who are criticizing him. And it's like, well, yeah, you know what? You did a good job in Florida. I'll give you that. but you also pass things in Florida that will make it impossible for you to win a national election. And that is another reason why Nikki Haley is overtaking him, because Republicans know that the one big issue that is rallying the Democrats
Abortion.
is abortion. And what did the Republicans in Florida and DeSantis do? They passed a 5-week abortion ban. That alone will bring the Democrats out to crush him.
Without a doubt. Well, speaking of crushing it, I think we've been crushing it lately, not over the last week because we've been out, but we're doing quite well, haven't we, Dr. Lopkin?
We are picking up steam. And of course, you can find every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcast app, which now includes the new Xvadio podcast channel that we are on, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. In fact, at this point, we are on just about every podcast platform out there.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and I'm looking forward to another exciting and engaging year.
Absolutely. It's a 2024 elections coming up. We've got people are optimistic about the economy, except for apparently the Fed, who is starting to change their mind. They're a little worried. So there is going to be a lot for us to cover. And I look forward to having all of our listeners with us every week. We'll see you then.